Today, we're going to explore one of the most famous and frankly one of the most unsettling experiments ever done, Universe 25. It's the story of a paradise built just for mice and what happened when that perfect world turned into an absolute nightmare.
You know, the whole experiment was driven by this one single, kind of haunting question. If you take away every single struggle a creature could possibly face, no predators, no hunger, no sickness, what happens to their society? Does it thrive forever? Or does something way more disturbing start to happen? So to answer that question, a researcher named John B. Calhoun decided to build a paradise. The whole idea was to create a world totally free of any physical problems, leaving just one thing to watch: how the mice treated each other. And this is maybe the most important part to get. This experiment was never really about running out of resources. It was what he called a mortality-inhibiting environment. Basically, a place specifically designed to remove every problem, except for one: population density. He wanted to see what that alone does to a society.
And when I say they thought of everything, I mean they thought of everything. The mice had unlimited food and water. The temperature was kept perfect 24/7. They had tons of nesting material, way more than they'd ever need. No predators, of course. No disease. And the whole place was kept spotless. On paper, it was literally heaven for a mouse.
And for a while it worked just like you'd think. The colony just exploded in population. But pretty soon, the very success of this utopia started to show some really deep cracks in their social world. Paradise was starting to fall apart.
You can actually break down the entire life of Universe 25 into 4 clear phases. It started with really healthy, fast growth. Then, that growth started to slow down as social problems began cropping up. That led to Phase 3, a period of total social collapse that Calhoun famously called the behavioral sink, which, finally, ended in the last phase, total extinction.
So at its absolute peak, the population hit 2,200 mice. The utopia was jam-packed. It was thriving. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. But this number, 2,200, is the key. It's the trigger for the entire disaster that was about to unfold. And this is where your mind kind of gets blown. The enclosure was built to easily handle around 3,000 mice, but the population peaked and then crashed hard at just 2,200. This is the smoking gun, right? The collapse had absolutely nothing to do with a lack of food or space. The problem was entirely social.
So this brings us to the dark heart of the whole experiment and the concept that really made it famous. Calhoun needed a name for this complete and utter breakdown of social order that he was witnessing. He called it the behavioral sink.
So what is a behavioral sink? Well, it's what happens when the sheer number of mice and the constant social interactions just become overwhelming. All the normal rules of being a mouse, courtship, raising young, defending your territory, they just break. They get replaced by chaos, violence, and just weird, destructive behavior. It's a downward spiral into social madness. And this slide just shows you the horrific reality of that collapse. Males became hyper-aggressive, just starting senseless fights for no reason. Mothers would abandon their own babies, or even attack them. Huge groups of mice just completely checked out, becoming totally isolated. Cannibalism and violence were everywhere. I mean, the very fabric of what it meant to be a mouse society had just ripped apart. Now, out of all these grim observations, Calhoun came up with this really profound theory to explain what he was seeing. This wasn't just a population crash to him, it was something deeper. A sort of spiritual extinction. He called it the theory of 2 deaths.
He saw a whole new generation of mice pop up, and he called them the beautiful ones. They were physically perfect, healthy, well-fed, and they had these gorgeous, unscarred coats because they never fought. But they did nothing. Literally nothing but eat, sleep, and groom themselves. They had totally withdrawn from social life. No mating, no fighting, no parenting. In this perfect world with zero hardship, an entire generation just lost the will to do anything but exist. They were physically alive, but like the quote says, they were socially dead.
So the core of his theory is this: the first death is social. It's that moment when individuals lose the spirit, the very knowledge of all the complex things they're supposed to do to keep a society going. And once that happens to enough of the population, the second death, the actual biological extinction, isn't just a possibility anymore, it's a certainty. Of course, an experiment this dramatic makes you ask a really uncomfortable question. What does this crazy story about mice in a box actually have to say about us? Is Universe 25 some kind of warning about our own future?
And honestly, the debate is intense. On one side, you have people who see it as this powerful, cautionary tale about things like urban crowding and social isolation, a stark reminder of how important our social bonds are. But then, the critics make some really good points. I mean, first and foremost, humans are not mice. We have culture, technology, and abstract thought. We can adapt in ways these mice just couldn't. Plus, the whole environment was totally artificial.
Today, the general consensus is that Universe 25 should be seen as a really provocative, but also flawed thought experiment. It's not a crystal ball. Its real value isn't in predicting our future, but in the really disturbing questions it forces us to ask about our present.
And so, that leaves us with the final, haunting question. As our own world gets more and more crowded and more complex, is the story of Universe 25 a chilling prophecy we need to pay attention to? Or is it just a dark fairy tale about mice with no real lesson for us? That's a question worth thinking about.